This is the story of a young woman with a family tree that spreads from India to Indonesia, Java, China, and maybe even Turkey. A family that celebrates both Hari Raya and Christmas. A family that plays the Beatles on a keyboard alongside traditional Malay songs. Welcome to The Brown Box. Today's guest is Sofie Buligis, theatre maker, arts educator, singer, actor, and producer. Her story asks some hard questions. What does it mean to belong when your family doesn't fit neatly into one place? When your grandmother's ID card says Malay, even though she's Chinese Indian? When your last name might have come from Indonesia, Java, Malaysia, or even Turkey? Or maybe even from someone who's running away from the law? This lineage forms the backstory of the theatre performance that Sofie recently showcased here in Singapore. Her first solo, one-woman interactive theatre production, which had a successful run at the Singapore Fringe Festival. We begin by understanding a single word, a word that became the name of her play, a word that defines so much of her story. So I say Celup-ness, Celup.
Celup. Like
Look.
look, but with a P at the end.
Okay. And you say Celup-ness?
Celup-ness. That's probably a more Malay way to say it. I'm probably butchering it. So don't feel pressure. Yeah. Celup is spelled C-E-L-U-P, celup. If you Google the definition of celup, it means to dip, to dunk, or to submerge. And it can also mean to scald. And I think that's quite interesting because in many ways I feel quite scalded by my own celup-ness. There's a lot of hurt that I have around feeling celup, because it's usually used as a brown or a Malay slang term to describe someone who's whitewashed. So someone who's brown on the outside but white on the inside. Anyone who's not quite connected to their Malayness.
And how's the word used in colloquial slang?
My grandparents would call me just like Budak celup or celup. And that means like a kid who is Malay but is not quite connected to their Malayness.
So when your grandparents would say this to you, was it with affection? What was the tone?
I think it was definitely with affection, but I could tell as a kid that it was a joke at my expense.
It seems appropriate that this word was used with affection because Sofie goes on to say this about her grandfather.
He's the source of my celup-ness, or he's the source of celup-ness in my family. Because I don't think he would consider himself a traditional Malay man in any way, shape or form. He speaks predominantly actually a lot of English. And he was really forward-thinking for his time. He's not a conservative person by any way, shape or means. He's quite liberal in the way that he sees the world, I think. He separated from my grandmother when my dad was still a kid. He's an interesting man because he's been married and divorced a couple times. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that. But his first wife was my dad's mom. She's Bengali. His second wife is a woman called Marie Rogers, and she's English. She's Caucasian. His third wife is a Malay Muslim woman from Malaysia. I call her Nananoy. And so all his wives are of different ethnicity. My mom is Chinese, Indian, but also Boyan. They are very Malay in their cultural practices. So growing up, I celebrated Hari Raya. But my family is weird because we also celebrate Christmas. And I think that a lot of people get really confused when I tell them we celebrate Christmas. And when I try to explain why we celebrate Christmas, it's difficult to explain because we don't celebrate it in a religious way. I think it's just an excuse for my family to get together and eat turkey and be merry and exchange presents. But I do think one of the biggest reasons why we celebrate Christmas is because my mom's stepfather, Vincent de Silva, he was Catholic. And he grew up celebrating Christmas, going to Catholic Mass. And so celebrating Christmas was a big part of him holding on to those family traditions even after he converted to Islam.
Although Sofie is building her life on this tiny red dot of Singapore, her heritage is genuinely global. Indian, Bengali, English, Malaysian, Javanese, maybe some Turkish, possibly Middle Eastern, Chinese, Boyan. and Catholic influences all run through her family. But in Singapore, this complex history and past has been flattened into the singular identity of being Malay. I asked Sofie about this box, the Malay box, and why she feels she doesn't fit into it.
I don't really look Malay, or I've been told I don't look Malay. My skin is a lot fairer than most people. I've been told I don't talk like a Malay person. I also don't think I have the vibe of a Malay person. I don't know. A lot of my Malay friends are just so effortlessly cool and relaxed. There's this stereotype of Malay people being very lepak or very chill. And I think that I'm quite a high-strung, anxious person, at least on the inside. The first time I felt the tension between who I was and perhaps who the world saw a typically Malay person would be was probably in primary school, because I remember going for those supplementary mother tongue classes. I remember sitting there staring at the whiteboard and wondering how all the other kids knew that the letter C was pronounced ch. And I knew that my Malay was bad, but I think that was the first time I was like, wow, my Malay is really bad. I didn't have a lot of Malay friends growing up, and so that was the first time I was in a room full of other Malay people. And it was really surprising to me that other people knew the language in a way that I didn't. And it made me feel really other. It made me feel like I had a lot of catching up to do, not just in terms of learning the language, but also in learning how to be a Malay person. Yeah. My name is not particularly Malay. My name is Sofie binti Syarin Buligis. The binti is very Malay, but Sofie is not a typical Malay name. And actually, my name comes from a Austrian baby that my parents met on their honeymoon. And they met a man called Ziggy, and he had a granddaughter called Sofie, who was just the happiest baby ever. And my parents decided then that if they ever had a daughter, they'd name her Sofie. They didn't want Sophia, because then my dad was like, yeah, then all our Malay relatives will call you Sophia, Sophia. And he didn't like that for whatever reason. But my Malay relatives do call me Sophie, because a lot of Malay makciks can't pronounce the F. And so the F becomes a P, and so they call me Sophie. That's a really cute, affectionate name that I'm known by in my family. So Sofie is not a particularly Malay name. Even Buligis is not a particularly Malay surname. And I get asked a lot about my Buligis surname. When I asked my dad about it, he said it came from his dad and his dad's dad, who's Malaysian and Javanese. There's a story in my family that someone was cycling through Turkey and saw the name Buligis in Turkey. And so rumor has it in my family that our name originated somewhere from Turkey. But I asked my aunt about it, and she said, actually, Sofie, no, we are Mansurs. And someone in the family changed their name to Buligis because they were running away from the law. So then I'm like, where did Mansur come from? And so I guess there's a lot of loose threads that me, as an adult, trying to trace my family history and where we came from. There's a lot of unanswered questions I have, just because there's a lot of history that I think has been lost over the years.
Being Malay is often understood as being Muslim, not just socially and culturally, but institutionally as well. For Sofie, whose family history stretches across many places with layers of culture and religious influence, this kind of definition must have felt odd, out of sync with her own experience. Torn between these two worlds, Sofie's teenage rebellion appeared in a surprising way.
My family is not particularly religious. We're not very strict Muslims. And so I guess when I was 13 or 14, the way that I chose to rebel, as a teenager, was to become super duper halal, which I think came as a surprise to my parents. I don't think it was a negative surprise. I think they were just shocked that was the route that I chose to go. Yeah.
What were you doing?
I was really particular about the kind of food that I ate. I would only eat at halal restaurants, and which was the norm for most Malay Muslim families, but I think my family is a bit looser when it comes to that. And then I used to go on the MUIS website and search for ingredients that were on the non-halal list or had traces of alcohol. And this is all really normal for most, or can be really normal for a lot of Malay Muslim families, but it was not normal in my Malay Muslim family. And so I guess my parents were really confused about that. Yeah. I remember starting to wear a lot of batik. So my great-grandma, she wears batik a lot when she was alive. And when she passed on, she actually passed on to me a lot of her batik. It's not been sewed into like skirts or dresses or anything. It's just like the loose batik. And so I did a lot of experimenting how to wear it and how to incorporate it into my wardrobe.
How long did it last?
Maybe a year. And then I gave. Yeah. Yeah. An interesting part of my life for me and for my family.
There was a place where Sofie found a kind of comfort, where she did feel like she belonged.
Growing up, I used to watch a lot of P. Ramlee movies. That's what my dad would play, like, on Sundays when the family was all at home. There's a particular P. Ramlee movie that I remember. It's etched in my mind. It's called... Oh my god, I'm going to butcher this. My Malay is so bad. But the series is called Bujang Lapok, and it translates to the lazy, the something bachelor.
I believe this movie is called The Overaged Bachelors, but it's also referred to as the worn-out bachelors, the moldy bachelors. Basically the male version of a spinster, I think.
P. Ramlee plays this bachelor, and there's this scene where Saloma, P. Ramlee's wife, plays this singer, this cabaret singer in a bar. And she's wearing a kebaya and she has a beehive. And she's singing this song called Larut Malam in the middle of a bar. I must have been like 6 or 7. And there was something just so cool about the way she was wielding the mic and the Malay band behind her. And they're all wearing like sunglasses even though it's indoors and at night. But the way that she was like crooning and wearing a kebaya, something about that really resonated with me. I think it was about a Malay body in a space that we didn't usually associate with Malay people. Like she was singing at essentially a nightclub or in a bar. There are people swirling their whiskey in their glasses and she's there with a beehive, like no less. And she's so glamorous and so cool and so talented. And there was something that really struck me about that.
Sofie's not alone in finding comfort in a P. Ramlee movie. His characters were urban, educated, stylish and modern, while still holding on to tradition and Malay culture. In many ways, P. Ramlee helped shape the idea of the modern Malay. You can see it even in a single scene, in characters like Saloma with her beehive hair, so chic, so of her time, but also her kebaya and the way she wore it with grace. You hear it in the music too. Malay lyrics set to modern jazz complete with a sunglass-wearing jazz band. And I can see how this would have had an impact on Sofie, because music was a big part of her life as well, starting with her grandfather.
He was in a band and he continues to still play it today. Not in bands, but in his house. He has a room set aside just for all his instruments, his guitars, his piano, not piano, his keyboard. And I have so many memories growing up, going to that house and learning how to play music and how to sing. He has all these chord books where he just writes down the chords to all these different songs. Like I grew up listening to like the Beatles, to Hotel California, which is a Malay anthem apparently, to House of the Rising Sun, to so many different jazz standards because of my grandfather. Growing up, music was a huge thing in my family. We had to learn an instrument. My brother learned guitar, I learned piano. And every Hari Raya, we had to go to my grandfather's house. And we'd all be subject to playing Hari Raya songs and the Beatles songs in his music room. I even have a memory of me and my uncle decided for whatever reason to record Doing That Thing You Do. And so he was on the guitar and I was on vocals. And somebody was on like bass guitar or something. We were on our 10th or 15th take. I don't know why we were doing so many takes. This recording didn't even go anywhere. It was on our 15th take and it was like the perfect take. And my grand-aunt walks into the room. She's like this hijabi lady. And she walks into the room and she goes, Sofie, if you're going to sing, you have to sing with spirit, okay? You have to sing from the heart. That's the kind of family I grew up in. We take music really seriously.
Sofie's Celup family and her own Celup-ness feels clearer to me now. I understand the idea of being dipped, of carrying layers of different cultures, races, religions, all coating you at once. I understand the words dunked, submerged in this context, and also of being scalded at times. Because being Celup must be painful. The pain of hiding parts of yourself, of not quite fitting in. So I asked Sofie about her performance, Celup, and how she took that pain and turned it into art.
I think the idea for Celup has been simmering in the back of my mind for a long time. I remember being 19 and talking to my grandma about her IC and how it said Malay, even though she is Chinese Indian and definitely not Malay. The story she tells me is that the immigration officer looked at her and she said she looked Malay, and so that's why he wrote Malay on her IC. And I remember that story like being stuck in my head for such a long time. And as a theatre maker, so much of what I want to do is to tell stories, but also to tell the story of my family and where we came from. I feel a really deep desire to memorialize my family and to preserve their memory, just because there's so many things I find fascinating about the women, especially in my family, and where they came from. I felt pulled especially to make Celup because I think I got to a point in my career. I'm still really early in my career, but I reached a point nonetheless where I felt that I didn't quite fit into English language theatre in Singapore. Like I felt too Malay or too brown for that space, but I didn't feel Malay enough for Malay language theatre in Singapore. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to wait around for a job to land in my lap. Let me make this piece that feels honest to what I'm experiencing and is fun and entertaining for people to watch.
And how did you land on this idea of it being interactive? I know you said that you wanted to engage with the audience, but how did you choose to do something that's a bit more experimental?
I thought about the kind of people that I wanted to watch the show, and I thought about their experience of watching it. I thought about my parents, or I thought about their friends, or like the everyday makcik and pakcik, and I was like, I want them to be able to watch my show and still feel like they're able to recognize themselves or be able to just have a good time watching it. It would be ironic, I think, to watch a show about a woman trying to connect with her culture when the people, the makciks and pakciks of Singapore wouldn't be able to sit down and enjoy the show. I worked hard to craft a show that felt accessible to people. I don't think it's necessarily a play about being what it means to be Malay as much as it is a play about what does it mean to belong. And so I hope that people shift their ideas of what it means to belong. I hope they expand their idea of what it means to belong to anywhere or anything. I hope they realize that there is more than one way that you can be anything.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thought. You speak about growing up with strong women, independent women. You obviously are one yourself. Who do you think inspired you?
I think hands down my mom. Like, she is the fiercest woman I know. If I could grow up to be like half the woman she is, I think I'd be really happy. I say that and then I catch myself like turning into her some days. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm becoming my mom. I've never seen her apologize for the amount of space she takes up in a room. I want so bad to be as strong and as fierce and as confident as her. But I think that there is a softness to me that I find actually really special. I really like that I am quite an emotional person and quite a tender person. I think I'm a lot more sensitive than my mom. I'm really emotionally sensitive as a person. I think that there is also power and strength in empathy and emotional sensitivity. I think that in connecting with people and in appealing to people by being really vulnerable about the things I care about or being really honest and earnest about the things I care about, I think that's also gotten me to different places as well.
Sofie is sensitive and emotional, but she also carries a lot of her mother's strength. Even at a young age, her commitment to theatre and to making space for brown and queer women is striking. Listen as she talks about the youth theatre group she ran when she was just 20 years old.
I ran a youth theatre company called the Runaway Company. Oh, it's more of a collective than a theatre company. I think at that point in time, there was community theatre in Singapore, but there weren't a lot of spaces for young people to make theatre, not the way that there is now, especially not making theatre amongst ourselves. It was usually like a bigger company that would then have a youth program. So I think it was quite exciting to be a bunch of young people, not really know what we're doing, but really try our best to create our own space and own our own stories. Yeah. And so I guess my agenda, if you will, as creative director was to platform a lot of queer brown stories. That was really important to me, just because I felt that there wasn't a lot of space for those stories to be heard. And it was really important to me to connect with other brown artists and to make them feel like there was a place where they could have their stories be heard. I think I felt called upon to create spaces for other people to platform their stories, more so than perhaps just being cast in a production and doing that. I realized that gave me so much more fulfillment, and it made me feel like I had a sense of agency over my career and over my place in the industry. Like, I love acting, and I love being able to bring a character to life when someone else has written the script and someone else is in charge of that production, because I can just focus on acting. But I also realized that I felt really fulfilled at the idea of being able to help make other stories happen instead of just being a vessel for a story to happen.
Is a part of that because you were not seeing representation in the roles?
For sure. We definitely still have a long way to go in terms of creating roles for Malay women and for Malay people in general, but especially Malay women. Not a lot of people have engaged with how Malay people have had to often put our Malayness in our back pocket in order to succeed in Singapore, which is ironic because we're a meritocratic multiracial society. But there's a lot of invisible and also not so invisible challenges that brown people have to get through in Singapore. We have Racial Harmony Day in Singapore, but that deeper engagement of multiculturalism is lacking in the way that most primary schools celebrate Racial Harmony Day. It's problematic how we don other people's cultural wear and then we don't really engage with the racism that a lot of people face. A lot of the times I find that I'm not cast in, or it feels like I'm not cast in things because I am Malay. And it's something that a friend and I had a conversation about after graduating from uni, because we were looking at each other and a lot of our Chinese classmates had been cast, but we were still waiting to get jobs. And we looked at each other and we were like, it can't be that we're bad actors or bad singers, because we know that we're good at what we do. And it was just a bit sad to imagine that a big reason why we weren't being cast was because we were brown. It's something that I experience, and it's something that a lot of other brown actors experience, but it's not something that I talk to my non-brown peers about very often. And it's not something I feel that I can always say when I'm in the room, when I have been cast, or when I'm looking to be cast. Yeah, which is sad. But I'm grateful for the spaces that I have where I do get to say, hey, we need to do something about this. We need to think about or bring more consciousness to how we cast people. And we need to start writing roles for Malay women and for brown women, because God knows there aren't enough of those in Singapore.
What would you like to see change in Singapore with representation of brown people on stage?
I hope that, one, we just have more brown stories, with brown people having more agency with the way that we tell these stories. But I also hope that there's room for more nuance and complexity in the way that we tell brown stories. I talk a lot about the internalized shame I have around being Malay, and I think that's important because so much of the current narratives around being brown, there are either just stereotypes of brown people, or I have to talk about how proud I am of being a brown person. And I am. But I also think that there is so much more room for nuance in the way that we tell brown stories. I should be allowed to talk about how I have a lot of internalized racism and I have a lot of internalized shame, and that doesn't take away from the pride that I have around being a brown person.
What would you say to a young girl who you felt was going through the same kind of disconnection?
I think my message to brown people who feel a disconnect with themselves and their culture is that you probably are more brown than you think you are. It's just about figuring out the way that you can be brown. If I could tell myself, like my younger self, anything, it would be that you already are Malay enough. Like you already are Malay. It doesn't matter that you don't speak Malay. It doesn't matter that you have this disconnect with the cultural practices, because you are going to be able to forge your own way of being Malay. And however you choose to do that is okay, because there is no one way to be Malay and no one way to be brown.
That's lovely. How do you think your own connection with your identity and sense of belonging has changed?
My mom asked me that recently, actually. I think my parents were like, you don't feel Malay enough. No, it's like, no, I didn't. I really didn't. A byproduct of talking to lots of people about what it means to be Malay, of going to therapy, is that I think I have healed my relationship with being Malay. Or at least I'm in a much better place now than I was a year ago. I do think that I am Malay enough now. Yeah.
That's great. Listening to Sofie has made me a tiny bit braver, more courageous, more confident in who I am. Because I'm definitely Celup, or a coconut, as I was more commonly referred to, and have never had a good relationship with my own Celup-ness. I look Indian. I sound a little American, sometimes a little British. I hate Bollywood movies, but I love European cinema. I was brought up Christian, but I found meaning in yoga and Hindu philosophy. I live now in Singapore, but it will never be home. My home, India, is no longer my home. Yes, I'm definitely Celup. But listening to Sofie has given me the strength to say, this is me. I don't fit neatly into your box, and I'm okay with that. I've been a bit dipped, dunked, submerged, and even scalded at times. But I'm stronger for it, and I'm more interesting for it too. I hope Sofie's story gives you the same permission. The permission to stop squeezing yourself into boxes, permission to embrace your own Celup-ness. Thank you for listening to The Brown Box. Join us next time as we speak with another inspiring brown woman right here in Singapore.